This is episode 104 of the SiteShed podcast, and it is relevant to anybody that has a website. So if that's you, then make sure you tune in. We're talking about some of the myths behind SEO today. If you get something out of this, and I'm sure you will, please make sure you firstly head across to iTunes and leave us a review. And then secondly, if you could share it with someone who also has a website, that would be fantastic. Enjoy.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello everyone and welcome to Toolbox Talks. My name is Matt Jones, and of late we've had a few inquiries from not clients, but I suppose people calling in, potentially looking at some of our services they had a few, I think, disillusions in the space of SEO, and I've just received a couple of good emails on the topic, and I thought I'd just go through and maybe pull apart some of these points out of these emails just so I can try and relate it better to trade-based organizations and how it can apply to you practically. A lot of the stuff here is not overly relevant. However, some of the stuff I think will be, and I'm sure that all of you guys out there that are familiar with the term SEO, but not overly familiar with, I suppose, the practicality of it and how it might apply to your business, then this will be a good podcast for you. First of all, if you're not familiar with the term SEO, it stands for search engine optimization. And what it basically refers to is the way that the content on your website shows up in search engines such as Google. Now, there's a lot of indicators which will help your content stand out on these search engines. And I'm just going to run through, I suppose, some of the key points here and things that you can employ. When we're talking about, I suppose, the difference between SEO and, say, a paid ad in Google. When you jump into Google and you search the term, it might be block drains in Melbourne, you'll typically see at the top of that page there'll be a bunch of advertisements, and you'll see it'll have a little ad, a little word next to it that says ad, and it's often a different color. And they're typically ads that are paid for every time they're clicked on. So this is what is commonly referred to as search engine marketing, or SEM, or you may be more familiar with what it's also called with the other name, which is Google AdWords, or even pay-per-click. So basically what happens is when somebody clicks on that link, you as the owner of that advertisement will get charged for each time it gets clicked on. Now, this can be an expensive strategy if you haven't planned it correctly. And just to give you an example, at the time of recording this, the search term drains unblock Sydney is currently costing $65 per click. Now, what that means is if somebody's looking on Google for, and they type in unblocking drains in Sydney, drains unblock in Sydney, and your advertisement shows up, if they click on that advertisement, you will instantly, your account will be debited $65. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that person's going to call you. That all that means is that you're going to get charged that amount, and then the conversion area of that whole, I suppose, arrangement comes down to how well your website is selling the story and getting people on the phones for you. So you can imagine, I mean, just in a quick mathematical equation here off the top of my head, if your website is converting at, say, 10%, and say, for example, you get 10 visitors to that website per day through Google AdWords, that example there is going to be costing you $650 per day, and you're going to get one of those customers back to your website. And you're not even convinced. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that person's going to call you. That just means that person's getting to your website from the ad they've seen. So it can be quite expensive, which is why it's important to understand how that works. Whereas when we're talking SEO is what they classify as organic, which basically means if you scroll down the page on that same search engine page there for looking for that search term, you'll see a whole bunch of content that doesn't have ad next to it, and that is what they classify as organic. And basically, organic traffic means it's been there, it's placed in that position because the traffic, the content itself is relevant to that search term, and it's good enough that Google deems it valid for what it's being looked for by the person, and then what the content that you've actually supplied on that page. So it is actually quite a good strategy because it doesn't cost you anything once you've set it up. It will take you your time and effort to get it correct in the first place. However, the good thing about SEO is it doesn't rely on ad spend. So whereas with search engine marketing, the minute you stop paying the money, the ad disappears. However, with SEO, it's got a better chance of staying around. So the other thing that I would like to, I suppose, firstly, the myth that I would like to dismiss is that SEO is an overnight result based strategy. So SEO does take time. It's not a case of building it once and it's done. On the flip side, Google AdWords, you can run a Google ad today and you can be showing online tomorrow for the search term that you're looking for, whereas SEO does not work like that. So SEO is more of a long-term strategy. However, it is more of a sustainable strategy. There's a bit of a myth out there with, the more links you have, more links are more important than content, and this is not true. So you get a lot of these SEO agencies, and I mean, for you guys that are familiar with this podcast and familiar with the material we produce, you'll know that I very often throw out that catchphrase, beware of specialists, because very often you'll get people that, we get it even ourselves, companies sending me emails talking about how many backlinks they can get us, to improve our search engine ranking. And the reality is it's just not true. Google actually released an update back in 2012 or 2013, it might have been, called Penguin. And that Penguin update basically changed the focus of the quality of links that you're obtaining. So whereas people or SEO specialists, inverted commas, at one stage were going out getting all these websites that were linking back to your website, which was at one point actually working and improving the rankings, Google smartened up to this, and then they realized that the quality of the websites that were linking back to yours were potentially complete rubbish. So they sort of nipped that on the bud. So yes, links are important, but they're not more important than the creation of good content on your website. So I would be dubious of organizations that are trying to sell you an SEO strategy or an SEO plan that don't have a content element involved in that. And if you want further clarification on that, I'm more than happy for you to email in. But I would just be wary of all these emails that you'll be getting from, overseas places where they're trying to sell you SEO. It's important that you understand, I suppose, what really is important when we're talking about SEO. It doesn't necessarily rely entirely on backlinks. It's very much focused on content creation. So, once you've got content strategy in place, then you've got a lot more leverage of ways that you can go in terms of then employing that, getting that out there into the search engines and optimizing it correctly. I've had a couple of people ask about security encrypted websites, and I think typically for trade-based organizations, it's not necessarily relevant. What we're talking about there is when you type in, or sometimes you'll see website URLs that at the beginning of the website, it will have HTTP // and then www. So the HTTP is pretty par for the course. What Google actually did, they released a version which is HTTPS, which is a security certificate standard. And what that basically means is it makes it a little bit harder for people like hackers to access that site. However, what we normally find is more often than not, unless your website has some sort of payment gateway on it or some sort of means of taking payment, via credit cards, etc., it's probably not that relevant at this stage. That may change, but at the moment, Google's not flipping a lid on websites that are not HTTPS, so don't stress too much about that. The other thing is that a lot of people are obsessed with, ranking. When we're talking about SEO, they're talking about ranking. And while that is important, it's more important that you understand what it is you're ranking for. So I've seen a lot of companies out there that will promote, we can get you on the first page of Google for SEO, and then they'll go and rank them for things like the name of the business. Now, this is pretty much irrelevant in most cases to most businesses, because at the end of the day, it's not about what your business is ranking for. It's about what people are looking for to find your business. So don't get too caught up in ranking this, ranking that. It's more about having a good keyword strategy in place that people are actually looking for. The other thing I'd like to touch on is the meta descriptions. And meta descriptions are basically, they're attributes that you can apply to pages of your website and also to even images that you upload into your website, which basically give Google an overview of what that content it relates to. Yes, it is important that you do apply meta descriptions to these pages. However, it's not paramount. We actually use a program in the websites that we create called SEO Yoast. That's YOAST, and that Sorry, it's Yoast. Yeah, Yoast, Yoast SEO. And that program there actually has like a step-by-step guide on how you can go about creating content on your website. It's a plugin. You can actually get that plugin through the plugin store in your WordPress website, and it doesn't cost you anything. And it gives you a blueprint on steps to follow in order to optimize that. We also have a course built on creating SEO friendly content, which is available to people that are part of the SiteShed community. If you'd like to get hold of that, by all means, just flick us an email and we can organize that, or we can send you the information regarding that community. Keyword optimization is another thing that a lot of people sometimes overlook, and then sometimes I think over focus on. So when we talk about keyword optimization, we're talking about making the keyword that you're focusing on stand out in search queries. So, for example, if we're talking about block drains in Sydney or block drains in Melbourne, we would typically have the keyword as block drains, and we would be optimizing that article and our images and things like that for that keyword. However, it's not a case of cramming as many of those words or phrases into that page as possible. You can also use a lot of assimilated keywords and things that are tie in closely to what you're talking about. So for an example there, sure, you might be optimizing this page for, block drains in Randwick. However, some associated keywords that may be similar to that, which you could also use in that article, could be things like block drains in Randwick, how to unblock a drain in Randwick, who to call when you have a block drain in Randwick, why we're the block drain experts in the Randwick area, just things like that. So you don't have to go crazy on filling your entire article or your video or whatever it is with this specific keyword. You can actually tie in other relevant keywords, which will also give credit to the original keyword itself. It's the difference between say having long tail and short tail keywords. And I don't want to get too technical here, but you don't have to focus so much on having an exact match. It's more about telling a story and then using the right words and content and lingo and associated keywords that will help you tell that story that people will relate to. The other thing as well on that topic is that overuse of keywords actually gets penalized by Google. And back in the day, many, many years ago, when the algorithm was a little less sophisticated, there was a lot of people that were going around, or a lot of, again, inverted commas, SEO specialists that were going around, and they were doing things that are now considered black hat. And black hat is basically things that are frowned on by Google, and you actually will get often penalized for that as well. And they were doing things like, in the background of your website, in the background of your white website, they would have a whole bunch of text which was written in white, which was all about your keyword. So, where you may have a section of black text on your website, which was talking about the benefits of the service you provide in the space of unblocking drains in the Randwick area. These SEO specialists were going around and filling all the space that was not black with white text, and then they were just writing block drains Randwick, block drains Randwick, block drains specialist Randwick, unblock drains Randwick, and things like that. So it was very sneaky, and Google's certainly they were all over that quite early in the piece. So yeah, you can forget about that. In terms of page hierarchy, there's also ways you can use header tags, which basically help you differentiate the order of importance of things that you are talking about. Now, these header tags are important, and they're also very powerful visually. However, they're not as relevant as people think from an SEO point of view, in terms of, if I'm using the right header tags here, will my rankings improve? It's not really how it works. So the advantage of using header tags in your content is that you can actually, it's easy for the reader to follow what basically is happening on that page. So they can see what the most important header is as the H1 tag, which is the main header tag. And then underneath that, there may be an H2 tag, which may be talking about a subtopic of that content. And that may not be it may be a basically like a sub point, if you will, of that H1 area. And then likewise, you can have H3s, H4s, H5s, H6s all the way down. Now that is getting a little bit technical. However, I suppose importantly what I want to say is it's not the most important element that the search engines are looking for. However, I think it is quite important if you're trying to build a page that is visually appeasing, because what happens is if it doesn't look good to the eye, it doesn't look good to the reader, it will affect your conversions, because people will look at that, they'll see a whole page which is full of just a whole bunch of text, and they won't actually read it. So be clever about how you structure your page and make sure that it's something that looks readable and it's informative as well, so that you're not actually just cramming an article full of words just so the search engines can find it. It should always, at the end of the day, be about the reader. There's a bit of a myth out there that relating around how your homepage needs a lot of content on it, and it doesn't need a lot of content on it. These days, less is more very often. So, back in the day, you'd see a lot of websites that were just crammed full of content. It's not so much relevant these days. And one of the reasons why as well, so think of yourself, if you're a plumbing company, typically the homepage of your plumbing company is talking about, obviously it's an introduction to yourselves. It normally talks about the core things or the core product that you deliver, and it does that in a way that, it should do that anyway. So what is it that you actually specialize in? What is the message you're trying to communicate? It will normally have some sort of way of someone to opt in or contact you, and it may have some sort of document they can get hold of, or some way they can join your community or your database or mailing list or whatever it is. And that's relative to your company. However, when we're talking about optimizing for content, people typically aren't jumping on Google and they're looking for a whole lot of content about your website. They're more looking about content that relates to the services that you deliver or the services that you provide. So, for example, if I was looking for a plumber in my area here in DY, I wouldn't be jumping online looking for Matt Jones Plumbing. I'd be jumping online looking for hot water specialist DY or roof and gutter repair DY or something like that. So don't get too caught up in that mindset of, okay, I need to have a whole lot of content on the website so that I can optimize it on the homepage anyway. Although it is important to a degree, it's more important that the homepage has the way of communicating what you do effectively, and then having a way for people to get more information that are more specific to services and offerings that you guys deliver. We get a lot of people that are caught up in, I suppose, the idea that the more pages that you have on your website, the better off you are. I would focus more on making sure that the pages that you do have has good content on it that's easier to use. And you can also be creative in keeping that content updated and revisiting that content and upgrading the content. When we talk about upgrading content, an example may be if you wrote a blog article which was about installing hot water heaters, and then maybe 2 years later, the brand of hot water heater you installed released a new model. You could go back to that original article and you could update that article, and that actually is good practice with SEO. So it's not so much a case of having more pages. I know back in the day, and we see this a lot even today, a lot of companies, and this did work at one point, which was why a lot of people were doing it. However, now it's very much frowned on. You might go to a lot of websites and you'll see scenarios where you might have the same content on multiple pages, and the things that may be changed might be like the service, or it could be the location. So an example might be, I know a lot of plumbing companies back in the day were going through their website and they were adding full pages with content that was talking about, block drains in Mossman, block drains in Neutral Bay, block drains in Colorado, block drains in Cremorne, block drains in North Sydney, whatever it was. And it was exactly the same content. The only thing they changed was the location. Now, this has since been blown out of the water, and this is not good content. So it's actually duplicate content. Duplicate content is a little bit of a gray area. You don't so much get penalized for having all this content on the site, but what happens is you'll typically only get search engine credit for the original page. So it's a complete waste of time, and anyone that's still doing that is stop doing it, because it's not doing you any good. Focus more on improving the pages that you do have and adding relevant pages that are in the interest of your audience and your readers. Don't just go on there creating content for the purpose of a search of the search engines making you showing up in a search engine query. It's more about making sure that, if you create an article, is it something that your reader is going to get value out of, or one of your customers or one of your potential customers is going to get value out of? We touched a little bit on user experience, and user experience is really important because, as we said a little while back, it's about making sure that your customer, when they get to your website, they're getting the information that they're looking for firstly. And then, of course, they're also getting it in a way that's digestible. So conversion optimization is a huge thing. And if I can leave one thing with you in relation to this, we get a lot of people that have come to us and they're talking about they want to get more traffic to their websites. And one of the big challenges that I throw back to them is, well, okay, if we can go down the path of marketing and, driving more traffic to the website. However, if you've already got traffic coming to that website, how about we try and improve converting the traffic that gets there a little bit better? Because if you can improve your website conversion from, say, 2% to 4%, and you're getting 10 leads a day, that automatically means you're getting 20 leads a day, and all you've done is just change some of the content and improve some of the conversion elements that lie on that website. So don't so much get caught up in the fact of, or in that mindset of, I need to be spending heaps of money in order to drive traffic. It's not always the case. Sometimes you can often do better by investing a little bit of money or investing a little bit of time if you're resourced yourself and have the knowledge on how you can change and improve the conversion elements that relate back to that website. There's a term which refers to SEO from a local level, and this is a really cool thing because if you jump on Google and you look for coffee shops in your local area, what you're going to typically find at the top of the page is going to be paid Google advertisements, and then directly underneath that you're going to see a section which is going to have a bunch of, like, an image of a map of your area with a bunch of little flags on it, and then underneath that it's going to have references to the flags in a little business description. Now, this is actually called, this is a Google My Business page, and you can get a Google My Business page for nothing, actually. They're free. What happens is you go to, if you just go if you search Google My Business in Google, you'll find out how you can actually obtain one of these pages. If you've got a Google Apps for Work, or it's now called G Suite account, your best bet is to set it up through that account there. You can do that through the Google Plus section up there towards your administration panel within your Gmail. However, what that does is it actually gives you a local point of reference for your business. So if anybody's typing in, whatever coffee shop or cafe in Neutral Bay, if your business has a Google My Business page, it's built with that reference there, then you'll show up in the search query above any of the SEO listings. So it's actually quite a powerful tool, and it's actually probably the only part of the entire dashboard or Google's search engine dashboard that actually looks cool. Like, it's got photos on it, and it's got flagged, and it's got an image and a map and all this cool stuff. So definitely head across and secure one of those if you haven't already. It's Google My Business, and yeah, they are free. And what will happen is they'll actually send you, once you register that email, once you register that account, Google will actually physically post you out a postcard. And the reason they do that is because they want to make sure the address you've given them is legitimate. So a lot of companies were going down that path of setting up all these different accounts for all these different businesses that didn't exist in different areas. And the way that Google worked around that was when you set that up, they'll mail you out physically a postcard, and within the postcard there's actually an activation code. And that activation code you need to enter into the account in order to set that up correctly. So go and do it if you have not already. It's not always completely relevant to trade organizations and small business. However, it is in a sense, because I know we build a lot of websites for companies that they want to do things like, that maybe they install a certain brand of hot water heater, or they represent a certain brand of product or whatever it is, and they want to put links across to these websites from their website. Firstly, I would always advise against doing that, because you're basically sending leads away from your website, which is the number one thing that you should not be doing. You're trying to keep people on your website. It's the reason now why as well we try and deter people to a degree from having the big social media banners up the top of the website, because people see that, click on here to like our page, they click on Facebook, and then what happens? They never come back. So yeah, we try and hide that as well if we can now down the bottom there somewhere. So it's only make people actually go looking for it if they want it. So in relation to the links, you can actually get penalised if websites are linking to your website that are of what Google considers a poor status website. So just be careful. Although it is good, of course, to link to to other websites if it's relevant, it also can be detrimental. And this goes back, I suppose, to all these link building strategies and things that were going on back in the day. Now people were just setting up all these bogus websites and then linking your website to it. And for a while there, it actually worked until the algorithm got smart and cracked down on it. So just be wary of who you're linking to on your website, and also be wary of who is linking to you on your website. And you can actually get rid of those links to a degree if you jump into Google and you can type in how to remove bad links. It'll send you to the right place and show you how you can actually figure that out. What else have we got here that I think is relevant? Obviously, if you guys haven't got a mobile strategy, you need to have one. If your website's not mobile responsive, you're basically, as of pretty sure it was June this year or May this year, Google's actually not being so. In a scenario where, say for example, there's two builders and they're in the same location, one has a mobile friendly website, one doesn't. In a scenario where somebody may have been looking for a builder in that area off their mobile phone or their tablet, or off their mobile device, Google will actually give credit to the company that has the website that is built with a mobile friendly design. So it's really important, especially for trade based organizations and contractors, that you guys that you do have a website that is built mobile friendly, because in the scenario where somebody may be looking for something, they might have a block drain in their house, they're not going to wait until they get in front of a computer at work to call you. They're going to jump on their phone and they're going to search for you straight away. So you've got to make sure that you've catered for that probability. And like mobile search is becoming more and more increasingly popular, to the point where now it actually outfavors desktop searches. And this is obviously more relevant to some industries than others. However, if you're in an emergency service style of business, then it's certainly relevant to you, because as I said before, that example, people are much more likely to jump on their phone and search you than they are to wait till they get home and then do a bit of research. So when we talk about, I suppose, who's in charge of your SEO. Now, this is an interesting topic, because obviously, when we do a lot of content creation in the space of trade-based businesses, builders, plumbers, electricians, whatever it is. We've got a pretty good idea of around these services and I suppose products that these companies deliver. However, it's important that you guys understand, when we're talking about creating SEO, it's really important that you guys yourselves have a contribution into it. And the reason that we say that is because it's, at the end of the day, it's a direct reflection of your business. And although you can outsource, your SEO and your content creation to other people, at the end of the day, it's kind of got to come from you to a degree. Like, it's your language and it's you communicating to your potential customer. And so it does often sound better if it's got a bit of your spin on it. Now, there are some technical elements to SEO, and in order to optimize this content correctly, then there are technical things that need to be applied to that. So what we typically like to recommend to people is, if you're happy enough creating some content around the space of whatever it is you want to talk about in your own words, once you've got that content that's built, it makes it a lot easier for you to outsource that. So if you were to send us, a page that you've created or a blog that you've written or whatever it is on, a service or a job that you've just completed, then once we've got that there, it's actually a lot easier for us to look at that content and say, okay, well then now we can focus this on this keyword. Let's put these this keyword strategies in place throughout this page and make sure that it's actually optimized from a search engine point of view. However, if you were to go straight to somebody who's offering SEO, and somebody that doesn't really understand your industry and doesn't really understand your niche and doesn't understand what it is you do, it's going to be very hard for them to come up with content that's relevant, A, to the reader, B, to your business, and then of course C, they may get it right for the search engines, but that doesn't help your user experience. So you want to make sure that the content that you're creating is firstly relevant to your audience, and you're building it with that in mind. And then once you've got that created, then you can employ SEO strategies to make sure that it stands out on search engines. So look, that's pretty much all I wanted to say just in relation to this. I again, just be wary of people out there trying to sell you, SEO. Do your research on them, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to sell you solutions that are no longer relevant and potentially also detrimental to the outcome of your business, your domain name, etc. So just be wary. If you want any more information, if you're not already subscribed to the SiteShed podcast, by all means, we're always creating stuff, relevant to, marketing related topics. So you're sure to get some pretty good information in there. And of course, if you're part of our Facebook group or the membership community, then you'll be able to post questions there that are relevant to these queries that you may have. And if we can't answer it, we'll sure as hell find somebody that can. So anyway, that was all. If you got something out of that, please let us know. Send us some comments in either the show notes, or better still, head across to iTunes where you can leave us a review. Those reviews absolutely help us maintain our status, especially in the new and noteworthy category of iTunes, which is really important for us. So I hope you enjoyed that, and we will speak to you in future events. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.